Are U.S. salaries still increasing on January 1st? Let's break it down, including an update that a lot of employees will be happy about. Now, backing up, in the U.S., to be paid a flat salary, no matter how many hours you work, and not have your employer have to pay you overtime, that's called exempt. Now, there are some different state laws that talk about what exempt means, but federally, across the U.S., there's like a floor. That law is called the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA. That was passed by Congress in the 1930s. And in that, they said, okay, certain positions will be classified as exempt, like executive, administrative. But like a lot of laws, the law doesn't include, all the details. That's what federal agencies decide. So since the 1930s, the U.S. Department of Labor, as a federal agency, has defined, what different exempt rules are. And there are some different ones, but for most of them, the U.S. Department of Labor looks at two things. What you do, so like, do you manage people? What administrative function of the business do you do? How much discretion do you have? Like, that's all what you do. The second test is how much you make. And so do you meet a minimum salary? And everything going on now is about that minimum salary. And oftentimes, it'll be like long stretches before that minimum salary is increased. So fast forwarding to current times, until 2019, the minimum salary was $23,660. So as long as you made more than that, you satisfied one of the tests. Then it was like the what do you do? And there's a little different, like there's one called the highly compensated employees, which means if you make a significant amount that's generally been over $100,000 and more, and it's gone up a bit, then they'll look less at what you do because they assume that if you're making that much money, you can negotiate for your own working conditions. Some people would agree with that, and some people would disagree from their experience. But that's some of the different. But overall, most exempt roles have had that 23,660 test. In 2016, when President Obama was in office, his Department of Labor sought to increase that from 23,660 up to more than 47,000. So a pretty big jump. So a lot of organizations, employers were figuring out what to do. Because if someone made then less than that $47,000, then employers had to choose. Do you increase them? Like if someone's making $23,660, all of a sudden are you more than doubling roughly their salary? Or do you convert them to a non-exempt employee? So now you have to track their time. They're eligible for overtime. So a lot went through these exercises. But days before it was taking effect, a federal district judge in Texas struck it down and said that because the jump was so much, it basically did away with the duties test. So it was too much of a jump. So when President Trump had taken office, rather than keep pushing for the 47,000, his Department of Labor basically came up with a compromise, which was an amount that's like 35,600 roughly. And so until July 1st of this year, it's been more than 35,000. Well, now President Biden is in office, so his Department of Labor sought to increase it again, that minimum salary. So to go from that 35,600. And they issued it in April this year, and it was a really quick increase. So July 1st, rather than oftentimes it's like months and months and months between when the Department of Labor announces it and it takes effect. But this time it was in April they announced it. July 1st it was taking effect. And it was in two phases. So July 1st increase and then January 1st, so just in a few months. So the July 1st increase was from 35,600 to about 44,000. But then it's scheduled to go up again, that minimum exempt for most exempt employees, to go up to almost 59,000 on January 1st. So what happened is when this increase was announced, business groups or employers started filing suit using a lot of the same arguments from 2016. And in those, some of those was like the state of Texas, for example, as an employer. So not all businesses in Texas, but the state of Texas as a government employer. They had filed suit saying like this increase is too much. You can't increase it that much. And a judge in Texas agreed, a federal district judge again, and struck down it taking effect on July 1st, but just for Texas as a government employer. So like if you work for the state of Texas as a government employee. But not a nationwide halt of ban, or the increase, which some people were surprised about. But so what's happened now is there have been legal challenges. And so still that judge had said, okay, we're going to halt it for Texas now for July 1st. But then also that's an injunction, which basically means it's on pause until we can do the full legal decision and analysis and hear from everyone in court. And so now there are three lawsuits that are still challenging this ban, which is a little unusual because Part 1 took effect for everybody except for the state of Texas on July 1st. But so there's three lawsuits. Still this state of Texas suit, another one in Texas called Flint Avenue that I've talked about a little bit, another one by the Association of Christian Schools, which was brought in federal court in Tennessee, but's moved to federal court in D.C. But all of these are saying basically the same thing, that you can't have such a big increase in the minimum salary test because that wasn't the intent of Congress like 90 years ago. Well, one thing that's happened is there's been a lot of speculation about, can you have this salary test at all? It was not there's no salary test in the FLSA, the law passed by Congress. But the Department of Labor has used this since the 1930s. But recently this came back because Justice Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court, just in a footnote, basically questioned, I imagine people are going to challenge whether you can have a salary test at all. Well, someone has challenged that, and that was a business that's a Burger King or Dairy Queen franchisee in Texas, named Mayfield. And he actually had filed suit about this in 2022, August. So basically years after President Trump's increase had taken effect, Mayfield then sued and said, hey, you can't have this salary test. You can't have one at all. There shouldn't be one. In part, there's speculation that they knew that President Biden was going to be increasing these salaries, and so to head that off. And so for business groups that wanted to have, the salary test not be part of the exempt at all. Well, a Texas court had said, hey, you can't, yes, you actually can't have a salary test. They've had it. And then the Court of Appeals, which is the next level before the Supreme Court, just a few weeks ago decided that, yes, this 2019, now from, years ago, salary increase can take effect, and you can have a salary test. You can have it. But there's this language, it's yeah, but it can't be a proxy. It can't be too much. And so there hasn't been a limit about, what does too much look like. And so a lot of people now are watching, in particular, the lawsuit that's the state of Texas, because that judge had already said, no, this increase, this isn't taking effect for Texas. And so a lot of people are looking at this larger increase taking effect January 1st, and they anticipate this judge would say, no, that's again, too much of a jump, just like the courts had said in 2016. But the good news is that employees will see is that there have been arguments of there shouldn't be any minimum salary at all. And so if that were the case, then you'd likely see organizations, whether you reduce salaries, you just don't increase them, there wouldn't be a legal requirement to increase them like there is now. So overall, a lot of people are watching this. So all of the briefing, the legal documents back and forth, have just finished up in the state of Texas. So now it's in the court's decision. So the judge could, anytime between now and December 31st, issue a decision on whether the January 1st increase will happen. The two other cases, the one in Texas, Flint Avenue, the one in D.C., Association of Christian Schools, are still in the briefing period, which is just the parties, the Department of Labor and the businesses doing or organizations doing filing back and forth. So I think the speculation is that the state of Texas decision ostensibly would come first, but you never know. And so this is very similar a lot to with the non-compete ban of people looking at things in the last minute. And so now you have a lot of employers and employees that are wondering about this January 1st increase, employers looking at budgeting for 2025, employees budgeting for their own life. And so that's part of the challenge, is that you've seen that, this is scheduled to take effect. Part of the increase already has, but it's still possible that a court will strike it down. So overall, yes, this is a pretty complex topic, so try to make it as short as possible. But the legal challenges are still ongoing, and we expect a decision any day, but the filing just finished up in the state of Texas decision. So we'll see how soon that comes out. I like to watch these dockets just to monitor. But again, I know how important this is as employers look to budget, but also for employees that are hoping to have that increase, to that $59,000 level from where it is now. But that is the deal. It is still very much in court.